Have you used resin to do a finish coat on your artwork? Today in the Art Lab, we're going to take a look at 2 different types of artwork and putting resin finish coats on them. So we have this piece here, which is quite a flat artwork, and we've got this more 3D type, which is going to take a little bit more effort to put a finish coat of resin onto. We've got texture, we've got 3D objects, as opposed to a nice simple flat picture. We're going to use the same resin, which is a finishing resin, or sometimes known as an art resin, to put our layer on. Now this layer is normally about 2 millimeters thick, and so we can use a resin calculator to work out how much resin we need. So it's normally the size of your artwork times a 2 millimeter layer, and this will give you the volume that you need. Now it's a bit trickier on a 3D object like this one. However, I find if you just add an extra, say 15%, then that should get you coverage, and maybe you'll have a little bit of resin left over that you can use on another project. Our very first step is to use some painter's tape, and we're going to put some painter's tape around the back edge here, so that if any resin drips down, that it is protected. Right, so this second artwork, because I'm probably going to put it in a frame, we don't need to take the resin right the way down the side, and so we just need the top coat of resin on the top here. So I'm going to run the masking tape or painter's tape just around the edge and just down a little bit from the top, so if we do get any resin come down, it just comes down a little bit. The next part is that we have to actually lift these off the silica mat here. There's a couple of ways you can do that. So you've got kind of these painting triangles, which are quite good. Now if the painting's not level, then you have to sort of adjust it up and down. Another option, if you've got a 3D printer, then you've got something like this, which adjusts, and you can raise and lower the heights of the different corners so that you can get it nice and level. So using these triangle ones, then this is where you potentially have to use little bits of paper to make adjustments. Now the painting over here is a good example which we can use the self-leveling power of resin to give us a nice even coat, whereas this one here, we're not going to get that because of just the texture we've got here, as well as our 3D objects, and so this one doesn't have to be as level. Ideally it's good to be a level around the edges here, because that will mean we don't have too much resin running off the edge, like if it's all sloped down to one corner, for example, since it's self-leveling. So now we're at this stage, we need to mix our resin. As I was saying before, your resin either is going to be called a finishing resin or sometimes called an art resin, and the purpose of this resin is to put a thin coat of resin across your artwork to protect it, make it nice and glossy, and give you the cool benefits that resin brings. In doing this, however, it's a chemical reaction, so we need to protect ourselves. So this is where we use our gloves, mask to prevent breathing in any toxins. You do this in a well ventilated room, and so in my case I've got the garage door open to let some air flow through. And ideally you should be wearing a long sleeve shirt. I don't have my art shirt with me today, it's a bit dirty, and so that's risk is on me if I get any resin on my skin. I use these cheap paint brushes that you can get from the hardware store. They're about $1 each, and this is perfect when you've got texture or 3D objects that you can spread the resin using this paintbrush. So the first step here is just to pour the resin across your artwork, across any of these 3D objects here, and then I'm going to use the paintbrush to make sure there's an even coat across everything. The method for covering your artwork with resin for a flat artwork is a little bit different. The easiest way I find is to, like the textured one, pour your resin across, and then you've got your protected gloves. So I just use my hands to smooth that resin right across the artwork, as well as to do a thin coat down the sides. Now, since resin is self-leveling, it should then give you a nice even layer across your art. Once you've let the resin sit for about 5 minutes to settle, you can then go over with a torch on your artwork and pop any air bubbles that may have risen to the surface. So it's the next day, and as you can see from our cup, that resin has cured, and we've got our 2 paintings here. So first one, that's done a nice even coat across it, and then we've got our more textured one, which we've used the paintbrush, and that's come up really well as well. And what we need to do now is remove the tape. We'll be using a heat gun to loosen up some of this epoxy around the edges so we can get that tape off easily. So what a heat gun does is that it will effectively make the resin softer, and that will mean we'll be able to pull this tape off nice and easily. Here's a butterfly artwork with a resin coat on it. So the resin gives a nice shine. We've got a coat all across the butterflies, as well as that white texture. Now, I had considered putting this in a white frame, and so I might do that yet, but so far here is the finished object with that nice shine across it from the resin. And here is the flat artwork that we've put the resin across. This is where we can see that nice shine. The other thing that resin does is just make those colours just that more richer and deeper. So it just makes it pop so much more. What do you think of these 2 artworks? Put your comments below. And this kind of wraps up then putting a clear coat of resin on your artwork. Now, if you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll endeavour to answer them. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, keep creating.